Good morning. My name is Beth Freeman. I am the Career Readiness Coordinator for the Kearney School District. I'm also a member of the Northland Education and Business Alliance, also known as NEBA. NEBA is a network of education and business organizations in Clay and Platte County. Our vision is to promote and provide business-driven educational opportunities for you, our next generation of business leaders. I will be your host during this session, and we also have two other NEBA members helping out today, Natalie Barner from Park Hill School District and Amy Washam from Northwest Missouri State University. She will be behind the scenes, kind of keeping us all the techie things rolling. And once we get to the question and answer session, Natalie's going to help us there. Speaking of the question and answer session, make sure you at home, make sure that you use the function to type in any questions that you might have for our panelists. We want to thank our panelists for joining us today and helping all of us understand a little bit more about the finance industry. We've got Ryan Mitchell with Edward Jones and Terrance Logan with Ivy Investments. We will start by just getting a little bit of background from each of them, and then we will move this into more of a conversation where we ask you at home to give us those questions, and we'll try to get through all of them. No guarantees, unfortunately. It just really depends on time. Speaking of time, we are going to need to end this session right at 10:40. So when there's a couple of minutes left, we'll do some wrapping up and make sure that we've gotten to as many questions as possible. After the session is over, stick around for a minute. You should see a pop-up window with a survey. We would love for you to fill out that survey so you can give us, the NEBA group, some feedback on how helpful you think this event was, things that you might suggest for the future for our virtual career expos and similar activities. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Terrance, if you will give us a background on your professional life and just a brief introduction, that would be great.
Awesome. Again, my name is Terrance Logan. I work with Ivy Investments. We're a mutual fund and SMA company. We deliver those to those clients, and we manage other people's money for the most part. How I got into finance is pretty cut and dry. I went to Northwest Missouri State. I graduated with 4-year bachelor's as well as my MBA. Also played football at Northwest, as well as was a Yale leader for during my master's. Soon after I graduated, I kind of fell into the finance world due to the ability to be outgoing and to hold conversations, really. Learn a little bit more about people. I found a way to help others by helping them with their finances, understanding their needs and what their struggles were. And that's kind of like my first foray into finance. And then I parlayed it into, I want to do a little bit more research and understand how to help clients on the fund end, because I didn't really truly understand what was inside of a mutual fund or what's inside of ETFs and things like that. And we have a couple of opportunities here in the Kansas City area. There's a couple of different fund companies that actually offer those positions. And I kind of jumped on it, and now here I am with Ivy Investments, helping others out from afar.
Thank you so much. Ryan, can you do the same and give us a little bit of history about your profession, what got you into it, maybe some education background?
Absolutely. Can you guys hear me? First step to hosting a good Zoom meeting. Welcome everybody, and thank you all for attending this session. I, like Terrance, sort of fell into finances. In high school, I didn't have access to personal finance classes. And no matter really who you are, you're going to deal with credit cards, you're going to buy a house, you're going to have to save for retirement. And so I was actually at a Thanksgiving dinner with some family friends. And my mom said to me, well, you should go and find out what our friend does for a living, because I was in college trying to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up. So I definitely fell into finance as well. I graduated from Blue Valley High School in Kansas City. I went to the University of Wisconsin in Madison, Wisconsin. Go Badgers. And then I started my career with Edward Jones in 2006. It's a wonderful career where my role is to help families and small businesses plan for achieving their financial goals. The way that I best describe it is if your parents are the CEOs of your family, I really act as the CFO. The family decides what they want to do, and I figure out financially what the best pathway is, depending on what your goals are.
Thank you so much. We are so happy to have both of you here, and I'm sure we're going to learn a lot in this session. Again, those of you at home, don't forget about that question and answer box at the bottom. Feel free to type away and give us any questions that you might have for our panelists. So I'm going to turn it over to Natalie. She is going to kind of keep the ball rolling here with our questions that have been posted.
Awesome, thank you. You both mentioned that you just kind of fell into finance, and you might not have started off in this path when you graduated high school and you were going to college. So what did you originally set your mind to do, and how did it change into the finance world? Terrance, you want to start with that question?
Sure. Actually, I was going into manufacturing. My MBA had an emphasis on quality management. So I was already kind of knee deep in dealing with numbers and things of that nature. Some of those questions, or not necessarily some of those questions, but some of those positions weren't necessarily open at the time. But one of the things that was open, and it was kind of like a conversation, kind of like Ryan said, I was with family, and one of them was like, hey, I don't know what I'm doing with my 401k. You're good with numbers. How about you take a look at it? And I was looking through it, went over some of the details. I asked my auntie a few questions like, hey, where is this at? How do you change to make some of the investments? And what are they? And so she gave me a number, and I called, at the time it was called JP Morgan Retirement Plan Services. And I ended up having to talk to one of the managers because they were so busy. And during our conversation, the manager was like, hey, we have a few open positions. Are you willing to get into finance? Have that crossed your path? And I was like, well, currently not looking at the time, but I'll have a conversation with you. And from that point, that's kind of where I got my first foot in the door. And it was just having a conversation, being inquisitive, trying to figure out the best way to help my auntie pick the best investments for her 401k for her retirement. And I parlayed into a career.
Great, thank you. Ryan?
So I was a little intimidated because Terrance has an MBA and I don't have anywhere near that. I have a bachelor's degree, and my path was a little unorthodox. I studied sociology in college, which is pretty far away from finance, except when you consider the fact that very few financial decisions that people make today have a whole lot to do with math. It really comes down to emotions and preparing yourself in the best way to make holistic decisions that are in the best interest of your family. What's interesting about my path is when I graduated from college, I had a couple of job offers, and Edward Jones was actually the lowest in pay. But what I realized is that even if this wasn't going to be the career path for me for my life, I would at least have the skill sets to take care of my own money for the rest of my life. It's like learning how to cook. You are always going to need to eat. So having these skill sets, even if it's not in exactly what you want to do in life, is going to be really, really important because it's a diligence. One of the things that Terrance said that I picked up on is listening skills are so critically important, not just in my field, our field, but also being very, very curious. That helps with asking questions and uncovering. A lot of what Terrance and I do is to uncover the truth behind what it is that you're saying. Very seldom do I get questions that are exactly the way that people are describing it. Usually we have to dig a layer or two deeper to find out what's really there.
Great, thank you. We do have a couple questions already, and then I have some more, but feel free, students, if you're on here, if you have anything, a follow-up to what we've talked about, to type that in the box too. One of the questions is, what is just the hardest part about finance in your day-to-day job? And Terrance, we'll start with you.
The hardest part about my job would be really fact finding. One of the things that we do, because numbers, math, it can be intimidating. But the more practice you have with it, the more you kind of immerse yourself within that particular genre or particular style of math, then things become a little bit easier. So in researching companies, trying to understand their balance sheets, their books, how they manage their money themselves, uncovering the truth, uncovering how they manipulate the numbers, uncovering how, or basically really just understanding what that company does and how they make money. That is literally the hardest part, in actually getting people to be truthful. So Ryan's skill set is something that I've had to learn over time, because the numbers and things come not necessarily fairly easy, but it's one of the things that if you practice enough, it becomes easy. Understanding how people will answer questions and not necessarily taking their word for total truth, but understanding it's part of the truth, has been the hardest thing that I've had to do, really. And then just matching that up with the numbers to get a holistic picture of what it is that this company is doing and what they're trying to do. And so that way you can kind of see what the prospects of their future path will be.
In my role, the hardest, I think, the hardest part of my role and position is really in the beginning of my career. If you can get to the place where I am now, then my job gets a whole lot easier. The longer I'm doing it, the more established the relationships that I have. So I don't want to say my job is easy now, but it's certainly easier than when I was first starting and building. I'd like to answer actually a different question than was asked. The hardest thing for you all when it comes to working with your finances is to be able to ask questions in a safe space. The people, well, let me back up. I have gotten every question in the book from the ones that were really, really insightful about the things that I would have to call Terrance and say, hey, Terrance, I got this question. I don't know the answer to it. And even from the very, very basic. And what's fascinating is the gap between how people understand and feel about finances. You should never feel small or that your questions don't deserve the dignity of an answer, because this stuff is not really that complicated. But what's important is that you have somebody that is patient with you to give you the correct answers so that you can learn these things, because it is really, really important.
Great. You both talked about building relationships right there, and just building those relationships with clients and people that you work with on a daily basis. Do you have any advice on building those relationships? And that kind of goes along with public speaking. I know Beth and I teach all of our students that public speaking is important, whether you're speaking to a group of 100 people or whether it's a one-on-one conversation, that's public speaking. Do you have any advice on that, building relationships and public speaking for students?
Yes. Practice, and get comfortable with being uncomfortable. I started speaking to Northland Caps about 4 years ago so that I could improve my public speaking skills. Hardest part about my job from the last question that I thought of is being actively engaged. active listening is a skill set, one that you can grow and become better at. It's really, really challenging. And it takes a lot of emotional energy to be fully engaged all day and really listening and connecting with the folks that you talk to.
Great. Anything different, Terrance?
No, not really. I mean, from public speaking, it really is rehearse. Either get in the mirror and kind of go over what it is that you're trying to say. One of the things that I know that has helped me with public speaking is making little note cards and having like a little bit of an outline, not necessarily like having full notes on a note card, but just having like 1 or 2 words or maybe a short sentence or phrase that kind of cues up the next thing that I wanted to talk about. And then once you feel a little bit more comfortable in front of a mirror, then have someone that you can basically do a role play with. So there's a few friends that I've had over the years where to this day, even though our paths have diverted, we'll still call each other every now and then if we have a big presentation coming up, and we'll role play. And we'll ask questions as to what did you think? Is there somewhere where I can either speed up or slow down? Am I saying things too quickly? Is my cadence understandable, or do I need to change up somewhere? And you develop that pocket of friends who are going to be honest with you no matter what. They're worth their weight in gold. But yeah, outside of that, from a networking standpoint, just being thoughtful. Again, Ryan said, I mean, sometimes people don't ask the right question. It's not every question is a dumb question. It's, did you ask a good question? Did you ask a question to allow for the person to give you more information than just a yes or no? Open-ended questioning or questions that kind of attack more of emotions and just more of an understanding had definitely helped out. Or learning that skill, like Ryan said. I mean, it is a skill that you can learn. And I will say one of the best tools within asking questions that I've learned is it's an acronym called LLAMA. LAMA. Again, LLAMA, LAMA. It stands for listening, acknowledging the statement that was made, making a statement, acknowledging that you acknowledge that statement, and then asking a question based off of the intel that you gathered. So what that does, it shows that you're listening to the person that's speaking. It shows that you have an understanding of what they just said. And then when you ask a question, it tends to be more meaningful, which allows you to get more information out of that person. And also that process, if you do it over and over again and practice it, it helps you to gain trust within the individual's mind. So that way you can, again, develop trust. And when you have a network that trusts you, you basically can write your key anywhere else in the world because you have a skill set that can take you there.
And if I could jump in just real quick,
Yeah, sure.
Anxiety about public speaking goes down when preparation goes up.
Yes.
If you are well prepared, you know exactly what you're going to talk about, then your anxiety sort of washes away. One of the things that I thought of when Terrance was speaking is what role is automation going to have in the future, and what skill sets can you start to build now that a computer can't do? A computer can't have a dialogue. A computer probably can't give a presentation. A computer cannot actively listen for your cues and your body language. And so leveraging those skill sets is going to be really, really important in the workforce of tomorrow. I talk a lot about language, and I'm actually on a war on the word just. Has anyone heard the term just saying? Oh, it's nails on a chalkboard. I know we don't really have chalkboards anymore, but if you're just doing something, you're doing it without intention or purpose. And when was something insightful ever preceded by, I'm just saying? It's awful. Facebook is all a conglomeration of just saying. But speak with intention, speak with purpose, and you'll command a lot more attention when you do that.
Ryan, you're showing your age to these, to these high schoolers. They're not on Facebook anymore.
I was going to say, they don't know what Facebook is.
Yeah, Insta, man. I am so old, God.
But those are absolutely great tips. I really appreciate those. We do have just kind of a starting off question. What is a starting salary that someone can anticipate in your job occupation in the finance world?
You want to roll with it, or I can start on my end?
My starting salary was $26,000, but that was 15 years ago. We've changed how the compensation works. It depends. Finance is such a huge area, so it depends where you go and what you do. But there's a very healthy amount of money that can be made in a career in finance. It's not where you start; it's where you finish.
Okay.
In my area of the world, well, just put it like this: Ryan's has a starting spot that's pretty sweet, coming out when you really never had any work, and it can get pretty lucrative over time if you master a skill set and you master networking, and you meet the right people and you just do right by people. So keep that in mind, because again, what Ryan is saying is it's not necessarily where you start, is where you finish, and you can finish looking pretty sweet. On my end, on the research and fund management end, there's a number of different paths that you can go. If you go on the sales side of the world, you're probably starting out between 45 and 50, 55. Just depending on the position, but you have to have a number of qualifications for it, right? So you have to get a certain number of licenses within a certain amount of time, which can be a little bit daunting. But with looking into the different colleges and different schools, some of those prepare you for those tests more so than others, especially if you go into a finance background or you're looking for a finance degree. Right. So there's actually a couple of tests, a couple of certification tests that actually kind of get you to start higher than 50. One of those is the CFP certification, Certified Financial Planner. It's actually pretty smart idea to look into it your second or third year in college, once you're kind of at that point, because you'll have more time to study. You're already in study mode, so it'll be probably easier to get. The CFA has a couple of different avenues for it. The Cfa Charter basically guarantees you to be starting at 80 within my world. But again, that's starting out. Some of the people within my firm, they've maybe held their CFA for 10 to 15 years. They're looking at 7 figures. But again, they've been in the game pretty for a long time, and they've developed their skill set and have very successful funds and of the like. All right, so depending on which path you want to go, there's definitely opportunities. I can tell you the path to 7 figures on my end of the book. The work-life balance isn't really there. You're doing a lot of research, you're doing a lot of travel. Your life basically becomes research and worry. So, but it's not to say that it's not a fun ride. It just depends on what you're looking for, and what your goal is. Now, from my understanding and from my experience, if you like helping others and you want to see people succeed and you want to and you want to be the best person and give back, then Ryan's path is probably one of the more fulfilling ones that you can find. So I'll say that to say it really just depends on which route you go, as to what path is going to be easiest or hardest. And there's different things you can do along the way to help you succeed. So, but I mean, it's going to be a fun ride either way. So just enjoy the journey and roll with the punches.
So it sounds like in both positions, you have a lot of opportunities for growth from where you started off at, which is great.
People in
Ryan,
finance are generally pretty good at making money.
yeah, you would hope, right? I would hope so. So speaking of an actual finance question right now, Ryan, this is for you. We have a student that is currently thinking about getting a job and wants to know maybe a percentage of income that they should start setting aside currently and saving to build their savings account up.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, and more so than the answer, I'm impressed with the question, because it means that you're prioritizing your savings. It means that you don't want to spend your money on sort of frivolous things. I mean, really, the thing that separates successful from unsuccessful investors are the dedication to that practice, more so than how much money you make. Is it a priority for you, and how early on do you start? From the previous question about how much money do you make, that's not really considering the ancillary benefit of how much more I understand about finance. When you know more about money, you're able to make more money on your money by placing things in the right areas. So there's some ancillary benefit there.
Great, thank you. We have a lot of questions. We have about probably 23 students on, so I want to thank you all for asking these great questions. This one is one that I don't know, and you might know or not, but Tesla and Apple recently had a stock split. Did you or your clients invest into these stocks, and why would somebody invest in stocks like that, or why wouldn't they? It's a great question that I don't know anything about. Yes
is the answer. Did I do I? Yes. So I got to be careful of as far as what I can say, but ultimately I tend to aspire to the Warren Buffett approach, which is that if you believe in the company, in their cause, in what they do, and in how they operate as a company, then it could be a good one to invest in. So I'm talking on my MacBook, I'm wearing my Apple Watch, I've got my ear pods in. And so I have a lot of clients who and folks that I work with that believe that Apple is a good company and have invested in it when it makes sense. Did we do that because of the stock split? No. I mean, do we invest in Tesla because it may split or it may get added to the S&P 500? No. I mean, I think a Tesla's cool. And you know, I'd be wary of investing in it now, but you know, when my folks invested in it, it was worth about 1/10 of what it is now. So it's been a fantastic investment. Great.
Well, when it comes to stock splits, there's a couple of different types of stock splits. So the ones that you've seen with Apple and Tesla, those basically allowed for other investors who typically couldn't, or who were skeptical on getting into those companies at their current prices. The valuations didn't change on those companies, but it made it more appealing for some of your smaller investors to get into those stocks. And again, those are strong names. Not really a whole lot of downside to them. You can see pathways to non-profitability for those with Tesla, but the momentum that they were riding and that they have with the way things are kind of playing out, it really just allow for the smaller investor to add to their position or to get into the stocks themselves. Because once you get to a certain price, the only ones who can invest into a company are those who are institutional.
So a stock split, for those of you who may not be aware, is essentially when you're creating more or less shares that are constantly traded. So a company has a certain number of shares. Essentially, it would be like turning in $1 and getting back 4 quarters. It's easier for somebody to find a quarter than it is for them to find $1. That's what Terrance is saying.
Gotcha. So do you both wake up every morning and watch the stock market pretty closely?
I go to sleep with it.
You go to
wake
sleep
up
with
with
it. Okay.
I don't.
Yeah.
I try to remove that from the conversation as much as possible.
Yeah.
The biggest question I've gotten over the last 2 months is, how is the election going to impact the stock market? Spoiler alert, it really doesn't.
All right. For both of you, a question is, what does a typical day in your life look like? And you can talk pre-pandemic, during pandemic, and the silver lining we're learning from the pandemic is we are getting used to talking to people on Zoom, and how has that affected your career, not being able to meet people in person all the time? Brian,
I'll let you go, Ryan.
So thank you. I have had 4 face-to-face meetings since March. We are really using this as an opportunity to stretch our skill sets with working with people with virtual meetings such as this. I think this is a wonderful time to stretch your comfort zone. Everything you've ever wanted in your whole life is just outside of your comfort zone. But now is an excellent time to build upon those skills that are going to be very, very beneficial in the future. Sometimes it's hard to get people roped into technology, but because all of your parents have had to figure out how to use Zoom for you kids going to school, they work with it with us too. So it has made things challenging in some areas, but ultimately we'll get through this together.
Great. Terrance?
For me, it has, in ways, it has made it challenging because typically I'll be on the road maybe once or twice a week going. It's definitely cut down on my travel. And what the issue with on my end is now people are more willing to take a meeting to talk more about their company. But the fact that I have been restricted on travel. I can't go to the facilities to kind of ask questions about how this works. I can't see if they have a new piece of machinery. I can't see or talk to the people who like manage the books or have like a random meeting where we could probably have some conversations offline. So it makes the deep diving into a company a little bit more difficult. But you do have more time in your day where you're not like spending hours in the airport trying to type up reports and things like that. So I do get that time back to actually have more meetings. So a typical day on my end probably starts around 6 a.m. Just trying to catch up on the things that may have happened overnight. Trying to put everything into more report spectrum. That way I can, when we do have conversations with our teammates and our other colleagues, I can articulate what my findings are. So that way we can kind of collectively come together on what our feelings are on that particular company and the prospects for their future growth. And from there, usually around 10 o'clock, I'll start making calls if we're not in a meeting already. Again, lunchtime, and then follow it up 2 o'clock. We're having other calls and things like that, and hopefully end my day when the market ends, and then see what kind of the price action of the different stocks as they go to make sure we're not getting blown up in a particular holding.
Great. Okay, you guys are both busy all day long. We have so many questions, and I know that we are not going to be able to get to them all. One, Ryan, for you, do you have to market yourself as a financial advisor, or does that kind of go along with your company?
That is a great question, and the answer is big fat yes. We are in charge of sourcing our own business and going out to find individuals to work with us.
Great.
Or
What
you
is,
can come to Northwest and come to my marketing class.
oh, you teach at Northwest too?
Oh yeah.
Nice. Go Bearcats. Anybody on here? There's your professor. What is the SEC's role in your individual company if they are in either of your companies? We only have about probably 2 minutes.
The SEC is involved in oversight and making sure everybody follows the rules.
Can you say what SEC is for everybody that doesn't
Securities
know?
and Exchange Commission.
Thank you.
So they oversee our industry to make sure that we are acting right by people.
Basically Big Brother that has been given permission by mom or dad to beat us up if we mess up.
Yeah. And one last rapid fire question for both of you. What advice do you have to teenagers that are really thinking about going into financing, into the finance industry?
Terrance mentioned it earlier, but one of the best tools in my box is open-ended questions. Is, are, do, does, has, all start closed-ended questions, and they're going to elicit a yes or no response. What, how, who, those are all open-ended questions, which someone can't typically answer with a yes or no. Try to orient yourself to asking open-ended questions. You'll get a lot more information.
Great advice. Terrance, do you have any last minute advice?
If you're looking into taking on finance or accounting as a major, then do that. When you get to a certain point after your Gen Eds have been met, start looking into certifications right away. There are certain licenses if you want to go more of the financial advisor route that you can do while you're in school. There is a few certifications that you can locate at the College of Financial Planning or the Cfa Charter. There's a couple other designations that you can get while you're in college. That will basically give you a leg up on anyone else coming out. Also, it increases your prospects and also increases your earning potential to start.
Great. Thank you. Great advice.
All right, guys, I'm going to hop in here, and unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. So I want to make sure to thank everybody. I want to thank our panelists. I want to thank our audience. I'm sorry if we didn't get to your question. I know there was a lot to cover. I do want to also remind you at home that once this session is over, you will have an opportunity to fill out a short survey. We really encourage you to do that. So we know how we're doing as far as planning these sessions and, making any changes that might be beneficial in the future. Also, if you want more information on any of these topics, you can go to NEBA's website, which is www.nebaworkskc.org. And you can get all sorts of information about our panelists and our sessions today. So thank you all again and have a great day.
Thank you, guys.
Have a good one.
You too. Thanks.
Go Bearcats.